Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 18 of the Tomato Timer. And joining us today is an award winning portfolio GP, a medical educator, an entrepreneur, writer, and a champion for diversity within the medical profession. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Dr. Patrice. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. It's great to be here.
So, I want to dive right in and just ask you how you're able to manage so many things while being a practicing doctor.
When I started all the things that I currently do, I was taking a year out of my training, and that's how I kind of got back into a lot of things like writing, which I used to do a lot of.
Okay.
So then I applied to the GP training program. So I was working full time, and it was incredibly difficult to keep up with all the things I was doing. So I would do a lot of things on the weekends, in the evenings, and it would definitely be quite challenging. And then since I completed my GP training and become a GP, I cut my hours down.
That makes sense. So we want to understand how you got into all these kind of seems like many different kind of areas of it is a medical industry, but in many ways it's very different. Lots of people just focus on one and just pursue it much further. But it seems like you've gone in every different facet that was available.
I have a portfolio career. So that basically means, what we've been discussing, that I have a number of different careers and interests. But I always wanted to be a doctor. Yes, and medicine was just always at the forefront of my mind. And when I started working as a doctor, I felt like I wasn't prepared for the challenges, and I was a bit disillusioned, I would say. I felt that I was working long hours and I was really burnt out, and I just wasn't spending enough time with my family, I felt.
Yeah.
So I really needed that time out. And it was during that time out that I got back into things like writing. So I used to love writing poetry. So things kind of happened over time. And with my writing career,
Yeah.
again, I write primarily now for GP Online. I wouldn't say I necessarily had a plan for everything. It was just, again, going back to discovering myself and my interests.
Yeah. Could you share a little bit more about your time at school and how when you got to kind of medical studies and how that kind of training and all that as well? Where did the passion first come to you?
So when I was like 4 years old, basically.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I was very, very young. I always wanted to be a doctor, and I just remember always just being fascinated by medicine. And I think from a very, very young age, I love learning. Like I just was always immersed in something, a puzzle or a book. And I think the passion just grew over time. The more I saw, everything I did just was geared up to applying to medical school and becoming a doctor. I had a really supportive family, and my parents helped me get some work experience, and I did some volunteering, I did some a first aid course, and I just did a number of different things just to make my application quite strong. Obviously, I had to get the grades, and it was just a combination of all that, and I got accepted into UCL.
I just want to kind of give our audience a better insight into how the medical degree career works.
The average duration for a medical degree is 5 years.
Mhm.
So as an undergraduate at UCL at the time, during 2007 when I applied, you had to, if you were undergraduate, you had to take a year out and do an intercalated BSc. I chose speech science and communication, which was all about, gesture and language. And then I went back to the medical degree. So I did 6 years, which was compulsory at the time. In your final year, you have to apply for jobs. So you have to apply to go to a hospital and work as a foundation doctor. So you do a medical degree, and once you finish your degree, you are a doctor. So you apply to the foundation program, you're assigned a number of jobs. You have to take an exam. So if I remember correctly, I did an exam called a SJT, or situational judgment test. And that goes, and obviously the higher you score, the better your chances at getting the hospital, the area that you want to work in. And I worked at Whipps Cross Hospital and Southend Hospital for my second year. At that point, I took a year out. And then I decided I wanted to apply to the GP training program, which is 3 years. And then again, you rotate through different jobs, different specialties, and just build the experience up. And then during that time, you have to do a number of assessments, and then you have to do formal exams. So you do another written exam called the AKT, Applied Knowledge Test. And then you do a practical exam called the Clinical Skills Assessment, which is the CSA. And then once you've done all of that, then you're a GP.
All of that. Wow, that's amazing. And I guess it requires so much perseverance to go through every step of the way. For me at least, when I look at my friends doing a medical degree, it's like you already have a longer degree anyway, and then just to hear from you all the next steps that are left to do before you actually become a practicing doctor in the specialized field, it sounds amazing. But how do you stay motivated? Where does that perseverance come from?
Oh, I think we all want to be successful, and I think for me, I've always wanted to be a doctor, and I wanted to complete my training. So there was a point when I, considered leaving medicine. It was when I took my year out, but I realized that the passion was still there, and I still wanted to be a doctor. And for me, it's just something that has just always burnt inside of me, and so that keeps me going. I love interacting with people. I love helping people. I love learning. And I love the variety, and I love the fact that with medicine, there's so many different things you can do with your degree. You can travel, you can get into different areas. Like obviously I've got into writing. There's so many things you can do. And you meet so many different people, not just obviously your patients, but, colleagues and your peers. And I just think it's a really interesting career. So I think the fact that I've been passionate about medicine, that's kept me driven, and I want to achieve something, and I want to leave a legacy. So I think all those things are just constantly in the back of my mind, and that kind of pushes me to keep on striving and wanting to do more and better myself.
That makes a lot of sense. And what would you I know that you've been interacting with lots of prospective medical applicants and successful medical applicants as well through your company, DreamSmartTutors. How did that come about, and what are the common trends you see among applicants, and any kind of advice you have for us?
So I started the company during my year out of training. So I did everything during my year of training, basically. I started DreamSmartTutors because, as I said earlier, I went to my old school, the comprehensive school I studied at, and I went back to offer my help and my expertise to the young people who wanted to get into a medical career. And I found, and by going to other schools and speaking to other students, I realized that not for everyone, because I don't want to stereotype, I don't want to generalize, but there was a common trend that I found, and it was I felt that the students I was speaking to hadn't done enough research. For me, I felt that it was really important that they understood so much about a medical career, the good, the bad, the ugly, because I got to that point where I wasn't sure if medicine was even for me. And this is coming from, someone who always wanted to do medicine, always wanted to be a doctor. For that person then to decide, actually, I'm not sure, should I leave medicine? I felt that the students who I was speaking to needed to really be informed. So I never kind of dissuade anyone. I never persuade anyone. I just give everyone the information, and I tell them my experience and my journey. And then the students decide, obviously, if they still want to do medicine, and I support them with that process. So that's how it already started. And as I said, the main thing I feel is that young people need to do their research. Now, I know it's difficult to get work experience, but there are loads of other things you can do as well, like workshops and courses and just reading around. There are loads of things on YouTube as well, loads of day in the life videos. So I think when I look back at my time applying, I don't think there was as much. But I think now there's so much more, that the young people can use to research a medical career. And I would just say that, as we've established, it's a long path to being a doctor and then specializing and then completing your training. So just really make sure that this is what you want. And I know it's difficult. And if you find, like me, you get to a point where you're not sure and you decide to leave medicine, there's no shame, there's no problem with that. I think it's important that you do something that makes you happy and that you are fulfilled by. And again, it is difficult to find that perfect career. Some people never find that perfect career. But my point is, it's okay to change careers. It's okay to say, well, I've done this for a little bit, and actually, I realize it's not for me, and then to go on and do something else. So I think those are the main things I wanted to say about that. But yeah, research your career, make sure that it's you, make sure that it is you, because sometimes I know parents or people might feel pressurized or pushed into certain careers.
Absolutely.
And it's difficult to obviously say no to your parents, or but if you don't have an honest, mature discussion with whoever you might feel is pressurizing you to go into a particular career, then honestly, when you'll be miserable, and you may find that you're not going to persist and be as dedicated as you were if it was you. So if it wasn't for me, if it wasn't my own passion and my own want to do this, I don't think I would have got even past the first kind of like month of medical school.
Yeah, the journey sounds truly long, arduous, but also very rewarding, I can imagine, at the end of it.
Hmm.
And I'm sure that having that kind of the research and understanding of what it entails and what you need to be able to do, but then what you can also get out of it as well. That the whole combination is such an important thing to have when you're applying to medical schools. So actually, I want to kind of move away from just specifically us and students and studying medicine, but talk about the medical profession in general, and talk about whether you've faced any discrimination, whether there's this lack of diversity as you've shared with us. How has that happened, and what do you see kind of changing in that area? Is there an increasing is diversity being increased in the number of applicants and number of doctors coming out at the end of it, or is there still a challenge we're facing there?
I think there's still a challenge. I think it goes for young students from certain socioeconomic backgrounds. So they may not have had a parent who've gone to university. They may be having free school meals, so just not economically well off. And then also from certain ethnicities, we know that there are certain ethnicities like those from a Caribbean heritage like myself are underrepresented at medical school. Now, although the figures haven't really changed from the last time I looked at the figures, they haven't changed or changed much. I think that there is more work being done to understand why there isn't this representation, and what we can do to help. So I know there are loads of up and coming organisations. There's loads of widening participation activities to try and help, but I do think we still have a long way to go. In terms
Yeah.
of discrimination, I wouldn't say I've faced any discrimination. Maybe that's because I've decided to go into general practice, which isn't as competitive as some of the other specialties. When I look back at my medical school career, or my medical school journey, sorry, I don't think it was discrimination, or overt discrimination. I mean, I suppose looking back, there may have been small things that I thought might have been a little bit unfair, or the way someone has spoken to me, or said certain things, or made certain jokes. But for me, like at school, when I go back to my comprehensive schooling, I wouldn't say I was bullied, but I didn't have a particularly great time in certain years. So I think from like year 9 to year 11, I didn't have the greatest experience. But because I had that focus and that determination and that drive, it didn't really matter for me
Yeah.
what people said or what they did or how they tried to make me feel. I just had that to hold on to. So it was always, I'm going to do this to get to where I need to be. And as long as I hold on to this, I'm going to succeed and I'm going to do it. And I did it. So that's why I really think it's really important to have a focus. I know it's difficult sometimes to find that focus, but if you can find it and, you can research a number of different areas and maybe try and find one or just find something to hold on to, then that will definitely help. So yes, there was, I suppose, looking back, I wouldn't even say, I don't know if it's discrimination is the right word, but there were some things that I noticed. But as I said, maybe because I had that experience from, during my schooling, I could deal with things much better.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. But that is very powerful, what you've said in terms of finding that kind of inner fire and using that to kind of blaze through whatever challenges the world puts ahead of you. And I'm sure that's a very motivational thing for all our listeners to hear. And what you would say to us out there who are kind of still in the journey of learning and exploring new things?
I would just say keep going, dream big, think smart, and always inspire. Have a dream. Dream whatever it is you want to dream about. You can do it, but it's important to be realistic and to make sure that you have a plan. So if you feel you want to be a doctor, and you're 14, how do you think you're going to get there? What do you need to do now so that in 5 years' time, or when you're applying, you will be equipped and you'll have all the things you need to make that happen. So please don't let anyone tell you can't do anything. Make sure that, yes, you have your dream, but you also make sure that you're realistic and you have a plan. And if you have that plan and you've done all your research and sort out all the help you need, then you will get there. And just to be persistent and to be positive.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Patrice, and it's been a pleasure having you.
That's okay. Thanks for having me.